All right, so quantum computing, right? It seems like everyone's talking about how it's going to like revolutionize everything, but who's actually going to make that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to get lost in all the hype.
Totally. I mean, you hear these names, IBM, Google, the big players,
Right.
but are they the ones really pushing the boundaries? That's what we're going to figure out today. We're diving deep, and I mean deep, into three companies that are all in on quantum: IonQ, Rigetti, and D-Wave.
And what makes this even more interesting is that these are all public companies, pure play quantum.
Exactly. So we can actually look at their financials, their strategies, all out in the open, no hiding behind some giant corporate
It
structure.
gives us a much clearer view.
For sure. So to get this right, we've gone through a ton of research, industry reports, financial statements, all that good stuff. You can find all the links in the description, by the way. We really want to give you a solid understanding of how these companies work, what makes them unique, and frankly, if they're worth your attention.
And honestly, that's the key, right? Cutting through the noise and getting to the real deal.
Couldn't agree more. So first things first, we got to figure out what these guys actually do. I mean, what's their bread and butter? How are they bringing in the cash at this point in the game?
Let's start with IonQ.
Okay, IonQ,
Yeah.
trapped ion quantum computers, right?
That's their game.
I gotta admit, it sounds pretty sci-fi.
It kind of is. Imagine like trapping a single atom, an ion, with lasers, and then using those lasers to control it to make it do calculations. That's the basic idea.
Wow, okay, so it's not like your typical computer with, electricity and circuits.
Nope, completely different ballgame. And they're offering access to this through cloud platforms like Amazon Bracket, Azure Quantum, and they're also doing direct contracts with some clients.
Smart move. So they're making it accessible to a wider audience.
Exactly. And their current lineup of systems Harmony, Aria, Forte, Tempo, all designed for high-fidelity qubits. In 2022, they hit what they call hashtag AQ25.
Algorithmic qubits, right.
You got it. It's a measure of how well the system can actually perform, accounting for errors. So hitting 25 AQ was a big deal. Showed they could handle some pretty complex stuff.
So it's not just about how many qubits you have, it's about how effectively they work.
Precisely. And for IonQ, this focus on high fidelity is a big part of their strategy.
Okay, so high-fidelity qubits, cloud access, but how are they actually making money?
Well, it's a mix, right? You've got fees from cloud usage, research partnerships, and some pretty hefty government contracts, like the $25.5 million deal with the U.S. Air Force.
That's not bad at all.
Nope. And they're expanding like crazy, building quantum data centers, even partnering internationally, especially in Europe.
So really pushing to be a global player.
Absolutely.
All right, so IonQ's core business is basically providing quantum hardware as a service, essentially. You're paying for time on their super advanced quantum computer. What about Rigetti? They're in the superconducting quantum processor game, right?
Yeah, superconducting is their focus. And their business model is also centered around QCaaS, quantum computing as a service. They're providing cloud access to their systems, and they've got plans to eventually sell their quantum processing units, their QPUs, down the line.
Makes sense. Start with the service, build the market, then offer the hardware when it's ready for prime time. So what are they offering right now?
They've got their Aspen series processors. Those have over 80 qubits. And the Novera, which is a 9-qubit QPU specifically designed for research.
Interesting. So different options for different needs. And how's the revenue looking for them?
Well, most of their revenue right now is coming from R&D contracts. They're working with DARPA. They're involved in a big project to build a commercial quantum computer in the UK. And they've got collaborations across various industries.
So very much a research-driven revenue model at this point.
Yeah, for now, it's development contracts and cloud fees. But they're aiming for hardware sales and subscriptions as their tech matures.
Makes sense. All right, on to D-Wave, the quantum annealing pioneers, right? They're all about optimization problems.
That's right. They've carved out a niche for themselves with quantum annealing. It's the type of quantum computing that's really good at solving specific kinds of optimization problems. Think like complex scheduling, logistics, stuff like that.
So more specialized than the universal quantum computers that IonQ and Rigetti are working on.
Right, it's a different approach. But it's finding real-world applications. Their main product is the Advantage system, which has over 5,000 qubits. You can access it through their cloud platform called Leap, or even buy the whole system, set it up on site.
5,000 qubits, that's a huge number.
Yeah, it is. And they're not just selling hardware, they're also offering professional services,
Yeah.
helping clients figure out how to actually use their annealers to solve their specific problems.
Smart. It's not enough to just have the technology. You got to show people how to use it. So how are they generating revenue?
Mostly through cloud subscriptions, maintenance contracts for their hardware, and sometimes they do direct hardware sales.
So kind of a hybrid model.
Mm.
But are they sticking solely to this annealing approach?
Well, here's the interesting part. They're also developing a gate model quantum computer using fluxonium qubits. That's a different type of qubit that has a lot of potential.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're hedging their bets.
Exactly. They're trying to broaden their reach, move beyond just optimization, and get into the broader quantum computing game.
Makes a lot of sense. So to sum it up, all three companies are in the business of quantum hardware, and they're all offering it as a service.
Right, but their revenue streams are still pretty modest. It's mostly coming from selling computing time and collaborating on research projects.
Okay, so now that we've got a handle on what they do, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. What's the quantum computing industry like as a whole?
It's still very early days, but the potential is enormous. Right now, the global market is estimated to be somewhere between $1 to $2 billion, but by 2030, it's projected to be more like $7 to $10 billion. That's a massive jump.
Huge potential for growth. What's driving that optimism?
A lot of it is investment, both from governments and private companies. There's a lot of money pouring into quantum research and development.
Yeah.
Everyone sees the potential for breakthroughs in cryptography, drug discovery, AI, you name it.
It sounds like there's a real belief that this is the future of tech.
Yeah, the long-term prospects are looking really good. But with that kind of potential, there's got to be some stiff competition, right?
So who are these guys up against?
Well, beyond IonQ, Rigetti, and D-Wave, you've got the tech giants, of course, IBM, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. They're all heavily invested in quantum.
It's like the Avengers of tech companies, all battling it out in the quantum realm.
Yeah, kind of. And then you've got a bunch of private companies, too, like Quantinuum, Sequantum, Xanadu, all with their own unique approaches.
So not just the big guys, but a whole ecosystem of startups. And each of them using different technology, right? Like IonQ with trapped ions, Rigetti with superconducting, D-Wave with annealing.
That's right. It's a real mix of approaches, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Makes for a very dynamic landscape.
It sounds like getting into this game isn't easy. What are the main barriers to entry?
Well, first off, you need the scientific expertise. This stuff is cutting edge. And then there's the infrastructure. You need specialized labs. You're talking chip fabrication, ultra-high vacuum systems, cryogenic temperatures. This is not your garage startup.
Sounds expensive.
Very expensive. And then, of course, you need years of dedicated research and development to get to the point where you're actually building something useful.
So you need the brains, the money, and the patience.
Pretty much.
What about the government? Are there a lot of regulations?
It's actually more about support than regulation right now. Governments are mostly throwing money at quantum, trying to encourage its development. There are some export controls, though, especially from the U.S. They don't want this tech falling into the wrong hands.
Makes sense. So bottom line, does this industry have legs? Is there a long-term future here?
I think the answer is a resounding yes. There's a pretty broad consensus that quantum computing is going to be a game changer. The growth projections, the investment, the continuous progress, it all points to a very bright future.
That's good to hear. Okay, so we've covered what these companies do. We've talked about the industry landscape. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. What gives them an edge? What are their competitive advantages?
Let's start with IonQ again.
They were all about quality, right? High-fidelity qubits.
Right, that's one of their biggest strengths. Their trapped ion technology lets them create qubits that are really stable, with long coherence times and high fidelity. And that translates to better performance. Remember that hashtag AQ25 they achieved? That's because their qubits are so good.
So they can do more with fewer qubits than some of their competitors.
Exactly. And on top of that, they've got some great partnerships. They're working with all the major cloud providers. They've got government contracts. They're expanding internationally.
They were the first pure-play quantum company to go public, right? Did that give them a head start?
It definitely did. They raised over $500 million from their SPAC merger. That's a lot of firepower to invest in R&D and talent.
So they've got the tech, the partnerships, the money. They must be feeling pretty good about themselves.
Well, they do have a strong brand in the industry. They're often seen as the most advanced and the best-funded public quantum company.
Sounds like a formidable combination. What about Rigetti? What are their strengths?
Rigetti's big on vertical integration. They actually own their own fabrication facility for making quantum chips. That gives them a lot of control over the process. They can experiment, iterate quickly.
So they're not reliant on other companies for their chips.
Exactly. It could give them a cost advantage and speed up their innovation.
Interesting. What else?
They're also pioneering a modular approach to building quantum computers. They're connecting smaller chips together to create larger systems.
Kind of like Lego blocks for quantum computers.
Yeah, kind of. If it works, it could be a way to scale up much faster than relying on single, increasingly complex chips.
Sounds promising. Are they doing any collaborations like IonQ?
Oh yeah, they're deeply involved with government and defense projects. They're working with DARPA. They're part of the UK's National Quantum Computing Program.
So they've got the government's backing? That's a good sign.
Definitely adds credibility. And within the quantum community, they're known for being innovators. They were some of the first to offer cloud-accessible superconducting processors.
All right, so Rigetti's got the manufacturing advantage, the modular approach, and the government backing. What about D-Wave? They're kind of the specialists, right? Focused on that annealing stuff.
Yeah, D-Wave's all about annealing, and they've been doing it longer than anyone else. That's their biggest advantage. They've got the experience, the patents, the know-how.
So they've got a real head start in that specific area.
Absolutely. And they've built up a solid customer base, working with companies like Volkswagen, MasterCard, and others.
Real-world applications, that's got to be a big selling point.
It is. And they've created a whole software ecosystem around their annealers, making it easier for people to use them. That's a big advantage, too.
So they're not just selling hardware, they're building a platform.
Right. And remember, they're also working on that gate model computer, so they're not limiting themselves to just annealing in the long run.
They're playing the long game. Okay, so we've got IonQ with their high-fidelity QUBTs, Rigetti with their vertical integration and modular approach, D-Wave with their annealing expertise. It sounds like it would be tough for a new company to just come in and copy them.
Yeah, it would be incredibly difficult. These companies have built up years of expertise. They've got the patents, the talent, the relationships. It's not something you can just replicate overnight.
It's like trying to build a rocket ship in your backyard.
Pretty much. Quantum computing is complex, it requires a huge investment, and a lot of patience. So these companies have a real advantage in that sense.
Well, speaking of investments, I think it's time to take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, who's all about helping you make smarter investment decisions.
Really cool tool that can help you, get these kinds of insights on your own whenever you need them.
Imagine this. You can generate a full report, like a detailed podcast or even a video analysis on any stock whenever you want.
And what if that analysis was tailored to you? Like, your level of financial knowledge, how deep you want to go in each area.
At stockanalytics.ai, we're not just imagining it, we're building it. We're creating a platform that lets you do all of that. And we're taking it even further. We're adding an interactive interface where you can ask specific questions about the stock, a voice-controlled stock screener to find your next great investment, and even a sophisticated portfolio analyzer that'll help you manage risk and stress test your holdings.
Don't wait. Go to stockanalytics.ai today and check out our demo. You can see the power of this technology firsthand. We've opened up our waiting list for beta users, and early adopters get 50% off. Plus, you might even get a chance to invest in the future of, financial intelligence.
Sign up now at stockanalytics.ai. You don't want to miss this. Right?
That's right.
He's got that Amazon background, so I'm guessing he knows a thing or two about scaling a tech company.
For sure. And since they went public in 2021, IonQ has actually been hitting their targets, even exceeding them in some cases. They reached that hashtag AQ25 milestone ahead of schedule. It's going to build some confidence with investors.
Delivering on promises, that's always a good sign. And their co-founders, Chris Monroe and Youngsang Kim, they're still involved, right?
Yeah, they're the scientific brains behind the operation, guiding the research and development. And from what we can tell, the communication from IonQ's management has been pretty good. They're transparent about their progress, they give regular updates, they're realistic but optimistic about the future.
No overhyping, just laying it out straight. That's refreshing. Any red flags, ethically?
Nothing major has come up.
Good to know. So overall, IonQ's leadership seems pretty solid. They've got the experience, they're meeting their goals, they're communicating well. What about Rigetti? They had a change at the top recently, right?
Yeah, the founder, Chad Rigetti, stepped down as CEO in late 2022.
Did they stumble a bit?
They faced some technical challenges, and there were maybe some overly ambitious projections. The new CEO, Dr. Subodh Kulkarni, seems to be taking a more measured approach.
So a bit more grounded, more focused on the long game.
Yeah, exactly. He's been very transparent about the setbacks they've had, missed targets, revenue decline, but they've also taken action. They did a strategic review, secured new funding, and they're focusing on more achievable goals in the near term.
So they're not shying away from the problems, they're tackling them head on.
Exactly. And the transition from the founder seems to have been handled well. Chad Rigetti is still with the company, focused on product development.
That's good. Continuity is important. What about their communication with investors? Are they being straight shooters?
It seems so. Dr. Kulkarni has actually cautioned against overhyping the stock, which is not something you hear every day from a CEO. He's really emphasizing sustainable progress, building long-term value.
Sounds like they're trying to rebuild trust after those setbacks.
Definitely. Overall, the new leadership team at Rigetti seems experienced, they're communicating well, and they're focused on delivering real results. Time will tell if they can turn things around, but the early signs are encouraging.
Okay, last but not least, D-Wave. They've got Alan Baratz as CEO, right?
That's right. He's been at the helm since 2020. He's got a good mix of technical and business experience.
So he's got the chops to lead a company in this space.
Yeah. He took them public in 2022, and the goal was to fund their dual strategy, both improving their annealing tech and developing that gate model computer.
Ambitious. Have they been able to deliver?
It's a mixed bag. They've made progress on the technology front, they've kept their key customers, but the growth hasn't been spectacular, and the stock price has been volatile.
Some bumps in the road. How do they handle the pressure?
Well, in 2023, their stock price dipped below $1. That's never a good sign. But they responded by refinancing and paying off a $30 million debt. That was a smart move.
So they took steps to shore up their financial position.
Yeah, showed some financial discipline. And they've been pretty upfront about their progress, their bookings, their milestones, their timeline to profitability. They're not sugarcoating things.
Honesty is always appreciated. It sounds like they've learned from some past mistakes, maybe some overpromising in the early days.
It seems so. They're definitely trying to build a reputation for being more realistic, more focused on delivering what they promise.
So D-Wave's management, they've had their ups and downs, but they seem to be on the right track. They're facing the challenges head on, they're communicating transparently, and they're making tough decisions to secure the company's future.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
So taking all three companies together, it sounds like the leadership is generally pretty good. They're honest, they're capable, and they're genuinely trying to create value for their shareholders.
I think that's a fair takeaway. They're all facing immense challenges, but they seem to be up for the task.
All right, so they've got the leadership, but are they using their money wisely? Let's talk capital allocation.
Yeah, how they're spending their money is crucial. It tells you a lot about their priorities and their long-term vision.
So IonQ, they're sitting on a pile of cash, right?
Over $537 million in cash at the end of 2022. That's a lot of firepower.
What are they doing with it?
They're mainly reinvesting it back into the business, focusing on R&D, building new quantum systems, expanding their infrastructure.
Smart. Stay ahead of the curve.
Right. And they're doing it carefully, trying to avoid unnecessary dilution. No dividends, no stock buybacks, just pure growth mode.
It's like they're building a rocket ship and they're not letting up on the fuel.
Exactly. And it seems to be paying off. Their revenue doubled in both 2022 and 2023. They're hitting their milestones.
So the investments are yielding results.
They are. And they're not making any rash acquisitions. They're mostly focused on organic growth.
Playing it smart, building their own technology and expertise.
Exactly.
Okay, what about Rigetti? They didn't raise as much money as IonQ, right?
No, they went public with about $200 million.
So they've got to be a bit more careful with their spending.
They are. Most of their money is going into R&D, building their next generation chips, and maintaining that fabrication facility they own. That's a big expense.
It is. And they had that cash burn problem, right? Spending more than they were bringing in.
Yeah. In 2023, their burn rate was exceeding their revenue. They had to do a strategic review, tighten their belts, and they raised more money.
So they recognized the problem and took action.
Yeah. They got another $217 million in funding, mostly through equity, so some dilution, but it gives them more runway to execute their plan.
Okay, so they're back on track financially. Are they making any big acquisitions?
Not really. They did acquire a company called QX Branch before they went public, but since then it's been all about internal development.
Focused on their core technology.
Exactly. They're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. They're betting on their ability to build a better quantum computer.
It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy.
Absolutely.
Okay, last up, D-Wave. They've been around longer, so I'm guessing they've got a different story.
Yet D-Wave has a more complex history. They raised a lot of money privately, and they also took on some debt. Their SPAC money was supposed to fund both their annealing work and the development of that gate mod computer. That's a lot to juggle.
Sounds like they're spreading themselves a bit thin.
It's a risk. But they also made a smart move last year. They used some of the money from a new equity raise to pay down $30 million in debt.
That's a good sign. Shows they're being responsible with their finances.
Exactly. They're also still mostly focused on internal development, no major acquisitions.
So they're sticking to their knitting, focusing on their core strengths. But are they profitable?
Not yet. They're still losing money, but they're investing heavily in R&D. They're betting big on both annealing and gate model computing.
So it's a long-term play.
Very much so. Their success will depend on whether those bets pay off.
All right, so we've talked about leadership, we've talked about capital allocation. Now let's get to the numbers. How are these companies actually performing financially?
Let's start with market cap. As of April 2025, IonQ is the biggest. They're valued at around $5 billion. Rigetti and D-Wave are both in the $2.2 to $2.3 billion range.
So IonQ is leading the pack, but those valuations seem pretty high considering none of them are profitable yet.
They are high, but that reflects the market's expectations. Investors are betting on the future potential of these companies.
Okay, let's talk revenue. IonQ had a great year, right?
Yeah, they brought in $43.1 million in 2024. That's a 95% increase from the previous year.
Wow, that's impressive growth. What about Rigetti and D-Wave?
Rigetti actually had a decline in revenue. They brought in about $10.8 million in 2024, and D-Wave was basically flat, about $8.8 million.
So IonQ is definitely the standout in terms of revenue growth.
No question, but none of them are profitable yet. IonQ's net loss was in the tens of millions. Rigetti lost $153 million, and D-Wave lost $143.9 million.
So they're all burning cash, but their balance sheets are okay, right? They don't have a lot of debt.
That's right. IonQ has practically no debt, Rigetti's is minimal, and D-Wave actually paid off a big chunk of their debt last year.
So they're managing their debt well, but they're still burning cash, they're not profitable, their valuations are high. It's a lot of risk for investors.
It is. But that's the nature of investing in early-stage companies.
Yeah.
You're betting on potential, not current performance.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've looked at what these companies do, their industry, their competitive advantages, their management, their capital allocation, and their financial performance. It's a lot to digest.
It is. But I think the main takeaway is that this is a very exciting field with huge potential, but it's also very early days. There's a lot of risk involved, but also the potential for huge rewards.
And if you're interested in learning more about emerging technologies and how to analyze investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel. We've got a lot of great content over there.
And before we wrap up, we do have a quick disclaimer about the research and the AI we use in our analysis.
Right, just a reminder that everything we've discussed here is for informational purposes only. It's not financial advice. The quantum computing industry is very speculative, and there's no guarantee of returns. We use AI to help us gather and analyze information, but the opinions we've expressed are our own. Always do your own research and consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Exactly. Don't take anything we've said as a recommendation to buy or sell any stock. Do your own due diligence.
All right, so to wrap things up, let's do a quick recap. IonQ is the current leader. They've got the technology, the financials, and the momentum. But their valuation is high. Rigetti is the comeback story. New leadership, new strategy, but they need to execute. And D-Wave is the specialist. They've got a niche in annealing, but they need to grow and prove that their gate model computer can compete.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
So here's the big question for you to ponder. Given everything we've discussed, which of these companies do you think has the best shot at winning the quantum race? And what will be the key indicator that they're on the right track? Is it about the technology, the partnerships, the revenue, the profitability? It's a complex question with no easy answers.
It is, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of the quantum revolution, and we're excited to see how it unfolds. So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep an eye on these companies. They might just change the world.
And don't forget to check out the links in the description for more information about IonQ, Rigetti, D-Wave, and the quantum computing industry as a whole.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.